All right, let's program the amazing Fleck 5600 SXT control valve. First thing we're going to do is get the time to 12:01 p.m. We're just going to press and hold one of the arrow buttons until the clock starts to move. We get this little pencil icon anytime we're entering values. That's how you know you're in the programming mode. So again, we can move the time up and down. We're going to get it to 12:01 p.m. and then press enter. One of the interesting things with the Fleck is to get into the master programming mode, we need it to be in 12:01 p.m. when we do the next step, which is to press and hold the up and the down arrow at the same time. This gets us into the master programming mode. You'll see in a second. There we go. So we've got a code up in the left-hand corner which tells us the portion of the programming which we're actually changing. We use the up and down buttons to change the value we see here. And then, of course, that pencil icon again tells us that we are, in fact, in the programming menu. So for the DF value, we want GAL for gallons. This will be our enter button. VT, this is, there's two different values that you can use here depending on the age of your Fleck 5600 SXT control valve. Some of the older valves will say ST1B. The newer control valves will say DF1B. So again, we want either ST1B or DF1B. So there's the ST1B for this particular control. CT, we want this to be FD. Press enter. NT is number of tanks. This particular system has one softening tank, so we'll set it to one softening tank and press enter. The capacity value. Capacity value will be different depending on the size of the resin bed which is attached to your 5600 SXT control valve. We're going to set this one up as a 1 cubic foot unit in the highest salt efficiency settings. So we'll set this to 20,000 grains of capacity. Hardness value. It's very, very critical that you input the correct hardness value here. In the case of the Fleck 5600 SXT, it wants the hardness in grains per gallon. If your water report or the information you have is in parts per million or milligrams per liter, you divide that by 17.1 to arrive at the grains per gallon. So the water that we're programming this for is 10 grains per gallon. We'll press enter. For the RS value, we want SF for safety factor. And the safety factor number that we want, this is a percentage that's kept in reserve, is 10. So 10%, press enter. Day override. If you are on a city water supply that doesn't have very much iron, and hardly any city water supplies do have significant iron, then the day override value you want is 14 days. If you are on a well water supply that is known to have a high amount of iron, then you want the day override value to be 5 days. And if it's a well water supply that doesn't have a high amount of iron, then a 7-day override value is just fine. So this is a well water supply. There's not much iron, so we're going to use the 7 for the day override. Regeneration time. You can pick any time you like. The 5600 SXT, the way we're setting it up is in what's called the meter delayed mode. So what this means is it's got a turbine that spins as the water use is being measured, so it knows how much water you're using. And with the other factors we're programming in here, it can come up with the regeneration day, so it picks the proper day to regenerate. The time we're gonna select here is simply the time of day that it actually does the regeneration once it decides it needs to happen. And you usually want to pick a time of day where you're not using your water. So for a lot of people, 2 a.m. is great because people are sleeping. For other couples, though, or other families, it might be better to do 2 p.m. Sometimes nobody's home in the middle of the afternoon, and 2 p.m. works just fine. We're going to use the 2 a.m. value here. Press enter. The backwash time. Backwash time, we want this to be 10 minutes. The brine draw is 60 minutes by default, and that's what we want to keep it as. The rapid rinse is 12 minutes, so we're going to leave it at 12 minutes and press enter. The brine fill time. Brine fill is again a function of the amount of resin you've got and whether you want your softener to be operating in the most salt efficient manner. So we're going to set this softener up for a 5-minute brine fill time. And lastly is the turbine. That is the actual device that's measuring the water flow. In this case, we use the T. Where'd it go? T0.7. Yep, that's a lowercase t, believe it or not. So the T0.7 is the turbine that we want. We press enter. The programming is actually done now. So when it kicks us out, it tells us the gallons remaining before the next regeneration, and that will count down over time. And the other thing it should give us is the clock. We'll wait for a second here. And there's the clock. So what we want to do now is press and hold one of the arrow keys to get the clock moving, and we'll set the clock to the proper time of day. There we go. And we'll press enter, and we're done.